August 26, 2025. Well, as the controversy continues over Trump's effort to crack down on the crime in D.C. and this discussion of the possibility of extending some of his policies to other cities, maybe Chicago or whatever. It is interesting that apparently he's achieved like something like 12 days as of this recording that were free of murder, and that the basically the crackdown has been somewhat effective in making the place safer. So this will be an interesting example. On the other hand, I would say going into say Chicago require a lot more National Guard and federal officers to handle that. DC is relatively a middle-sized city. I mean, it's not an extremely large area, which is New York, Chicago, or L.A. would be, for example. So, at any rate, but it has shown something. It'll be interesting to see what happens, given the Democrats, such as Pritzker of Illinois, steadfast stance in support of the criminal element. It seems like the Democrats really want to support the criminal. Now, there's a big petition out that's been put out that on that truck driver that killed 3 people in Florida. He was a legal immigrant, and it's unclear how he ever got a license to drive a big rig, but he somehow did. That's a special license, it's not the basic driver's license. It's a very special license you have to get, and this is just amazing that this guy was able to get that license, and yeah, he's a legal immigrant, and now we got nearly 3 million people signing a petition to support him. This is incredible. The Democrats are really gone crazier and crazier, and Pritzker is a perfect example of that. I mean, so he really thinks that the murder rate in Chicago is acceptable and nothing should be done about it. Well, he isn't doing anything about it, is he? So that guy is, in my opinion, kind of first-class disgusting. But at any rate, it definitely leaves some advantage to Trump politically. I notice in Real Clear Politics, he's is down 5 points, which for a president that's in office is probably not too much different than say where Obama would have been or something. So it's not that bad. It seems like when somebody's actually doing the job, something they do rubs some people the wrong way, and so you have a little bit of negativity there, which is just typical. But I think compared to his first term, he's doing quite well. So in terms of popularity and certainly political action. So at any rate, that's kind of the way that one's going. Well, if you like these videos, please give me a like, subscribe, and click the bell for notification, and or you can follow me on Rumble as an alternative. The address in the description below. So yeah, that will be certainly one of the issues. I notice now this Lisa Cook, who was a governor on the Federal Reserve that was appointed under Biden, apparently squeaked through with Kamala Harris casting the deciding vote. Doesn't sound like maybe the most qualified person there. I don't know. I'm not sure quite what was going on with that. But at any rate, apparently she's run into some issues with the thing that's been haunting a few people, such as Schiff and Senator Schiff and all these people, that they've declared more than one residence as their primary home. And apparently this has come up in her case too. And so Trump is now using the clause about being able to fire for cause to try to remove her from the Federal Reserve Board, which will be very interesting to see how that plays out. It potentially will end up being a court battle again, but because whether or not that there really is sufficient cause there or not, I don't know. One thing is she really guilty. That I don't know that that's been established, and I don't know whether just somebody saying she's guilty is sufficient cause or not. It seems like it would still potentially be a court issue. On the other hand, if there's a potential for prosecution, it might be a situation where she might simply choose to step down in a deal in which she wouldn't be prosecuted, because after all, the fraud on these forms can be quite serious. Another thought's occurred to me, which interesting thought, and that is, were these two loans done at the same time? I mean, for example, let's say somebody was living in one home and got a mortgage on that home, and that was being declared to be their primary home, and then at some later time, they were going to move, perhaps because they're going to be appointed to some job or something, and therefore they were applied for a mortgage on another home and then declared that to be their primary home. You could have two things declared, but they're sequential, not simultaneous, potentially. And in that case, maybe it isn't a fraud. It actually, because you're leaving one and going to the other, and the loan was already established on the first one. And I don't know, once that's established, and if it's true at the time, I don't know if there's any particular requirement of notification or anything. So I think that still may be controversial, even if she's guilty of a crime there. But that will, how politics is. We'll see what happens. It probably will be a court case, as always. And of course, this is all because Trump wants to have a very dovish Federal Reserve Board that will lower interest rates. And again, that's been a viewpoint that he's had from even before he was in office. So at any rate, that's another development. The other thing that we have from Trump, which is interesting, is that he's apparently issued some kind of an executive order making burning the flag, desecrating the flag, a offense punishable by up to a year in jail. I guess this applies only to D.C., I think, because he's taken the federal control over D.C. So I don't know. It's an interesting question whether you can actually pass a law by decree or not, or is there some legal precedent under an existing law which gives him the ability to take some other regulation and include that under the existing. That will probably run into another Supreme Court challenge if anybody's actually charged for it, because the Supreme Court many years ago ruled that, get this, that burning the flag was a constitutionally protected speech. I personally disagreed with that on the grounds that it's not, in my opinion, it's an action, not a speech, and therefore it shouldn't have been protected. But the Supreme Court at the time unanimously had a different opinion. So I don't know whether this court would be prepared to reverse that. And also, does this grounds for this action does that really exist or not under existing law? I don't know exactly how that goes. I mean, when you take over, he's made a variety of other decisions, which the actual decisions sound pretty good in and of themselves. But then again, he only has like 30 days to maintain it unless Congress actually passes a law to extend it. And my guess is Congress won't, given the Democrats and the fact it would have to pass the Senate. With the Democrats should be thanking their whatever luck that they didn't actually end the filibuster back during Biden's first term, because then there would be probably little they might be able to do to stop some of these things. But as it is, it might be different. And so that's kind of another development that's kind of going along there, and we'll see. Now, also, I understand some judge has ruled against the alligator Alcatraz thing in Florida. Probably another left-wing judge. That might get overturned. Although I think the thing that's caused so much issue there is the name they gave it. If they hadn't called it alligator Alcatraz, it probably wouldn't have. If it was just the Everglades detention facility or something like that, probably nobody would really, have any particular qualm. But you know how that goes. So, on other fronts, of course, I had mentioned previously that there was that interesting case where the Russians had bombed a factory that was owned by an American company in western Ukraine, and I know that Trump has made a comment that he's not happy with that. Well, but I'm wondering. I was expressed a little bit of bewilderment as to why they did it, but I'm wondering, do they suspect that factory is actually making electronics that potentially is going into the Ukrainian defense industry? Because I've seen some videos where the Russians carried out some coordinated attacks trying to knock out the production capacity for a ballistic missile that the Ukrainians have developed. And so I don't know, the Russians in the video, they were claiming that they've been successful. Of course, that doesn't necessarily mean it's correct, but that's what they claim. And then now the Ukrainians have another missile, I think they're calling the Flamingo, which is basically a cruise missile. Think sort of like an updated version of the V-1 buzz bomb of World War II, but with modern tech. And probably more range and a better engine, probably a turbojet rather than a pulse jet. So I think that'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. But the thing is, if companies from the West are actually trying to build defense infrastructure in Ukraine in the middle of a war, it's naturally going to come under attack. But supposedly this factory was simply making like video games and stuff. But that's another little development that we'll have to kind of see how that pans out. But so at any rate, it gets interesting here, and we'll see. The other thing that Trump is doing, which I think is going to be interesting, is he wants to change the name from the Defense Department to the War Department, which is kind of interesting. It must be a real traditionalist. However, historically, the War Department was just the Department of the Army. If you go historically, it wasn't all armed forces. The Department of the Navy was a separate entity, and it was during the 47 Defense Reorganization Act, in which such things as the CIA was created, the Air Force was made a separate service, that the Defense Department was created to integrate all the different armed forces under one roof. And we'll be interested to see how that plays out also. I don't know that he can do that by decree without congressional approval. He thinks that Congress will go along. I'm not so sure they will, but we'll see on that. I think he's kind of pushing the envelope a little bit on trying to be provocative at times when you probably maybe don't need to be, but at any rate, he likes to be. So at any rate, I'll kind of be wrapping this up for this time, but those are some of the kind of developments that are ongoing, and we'll have to see what happens next. So you can I'll post this on YouTube and Rumble as always, and of course the address of my social media accounts are in the description below. All for now.